Are you being love bombed, gaslit, hoovered, discarded, final discarded, breadcrumbs? Oh my gosh, it is all so confusing. My name's Ruth Ann. I'm a clinical psychologist. I'm an expert in relationships and issues of narcissism. And in this video, I want to help you get underneath that language and really make sense of your experiences and help you see some ways that you might be able to nurture more reciprocal, more fulfilling relationships for yourself in the future if you have been through the kind of very painful experiences that this language is used to describe. Now, I understand that when you've been through a very confusing, perhaps abusive or very hurtful relationship, that you are really desperate to understand and make sense of it. And language like gaslighting and love bombing and breadcrumbing can be a way of making sense of the other person's behavior and how you were treated. And it can also bring a sense of validation of your experiences, that other people can understand them, and a sense of connection with other people who might have been through something similar. And in that sense, I think some of the language used to describe narcissism and hurtful and abusive relationships can be helpful to a lot of people. So I'm not saying that this language is bad or wrong. However, I do think it can be a double-edged sword. One of the issues with this language is that outside of rather niche communities, a lot of people don't necessarily know what you're talking about. And it's also used to describe the behavior of the other person. It is very much focused on what the other person does, what they do to you, who they are, what may or may not be wrong with them. And in that sense, I think it really doesn't give voice to the nuances and the complexity and the ambiguity and the confusion and the contradictions that are inherent in relationships where people get very hurt or where they get abused, particularly where they get emotionally abused. You can become so focused on trying to make sense of the other person and their behavior that you absolutely neglect to make sense of you and what your experiences of this relationship are or have been and how you have responded. Something that's very helpful is to put your experiences into words, into everyday language that someone else might understand. So rather than saying, I'm being gaslit, you could say, there are times when my partner says one thing and then later on they say they didn't say the thing they said. They say something completely different. And then they suggest to me that I'm just confused. But I really don't think that I am confused. Or you can say, there are times when I say I'm upset about something and my partner says, you're not upset at all. Or you have no right to be upset about that. Or maybe you're just hormonal. Or perhaps you're mentally ill. Describing it in that way really begins to give voice to your experiences. And you can also then begin to describe what is the impact that that has on you. Maybe you end up feeling small and diminished. Maybe you end up angry, resentful, losing your temper. Maybe you end up infuriated. Maybe you end up completely confused and unsure how to square someone who may be at times a warm and loving person with someone who at other times can be cold, callous, and cruel. Putting it in this way can give you a language that you can begin to understand your experiences, your experience of the relationship of the other person, and your reaction to them. And that can make it easier to begin to reach out to other people, perhaps those close to you, to explain, this is the situation I find myself in. And it's a really difficult and confusing situation. I think this is really important, particularly in relationships where there may be someone who's showing signs of pathological narcissism. Because relationships with someone who might be highly narcissistic are inherently contradictory. The highs can be high, but the lows can be just as low. And that can be confusing. And sometimes a way to cope with the ambivalence and cognitive dissonance of that is to make the other person the bad guy, the narcissist, the one who is at fault, the one who wears a mask and pretends to be nice, but the one who is really deep down inside demonic and monstrous. In fact, both can exist in the same person. They may be at times good. They may be at times deeply caring about you. They may be at times fun and charismatic to be with. And at other times, they may be moody, sullen, withdrawn, angry, cold, callous, and abusive. Those two things can exist in one person. And being able to understand that contradiction, put it into words, can help you to understand not only the other person, but the relationship you have with them, why your feelings may be so muddled and confused, and what your reaction may be to them. And it can also help you to put into words your reaction to this person. Do you become angry and enraged? Do you end up losing your temper and acting in a way that really isn't your best self? Do you become overly accommodating, over-pleasing, over-giving, over-generous, and self-sacrificing, ending up feeling exhausted, depleted, and resentful? And you can begin to think to yourself, if this dynamic between us continues, where do I end up? What do I become? And who do I become in this relationship? And I think that is a much more realistic place to begin to make sense of the relationship and the dynamic between you. It also is really helpful to make sense of the contradictions. People are not one thing, you are not one thing, your partner is not one thing, and your relationship is not one thing. There will always be conflicts, tensions, and contradictions. When you can put it into words like that, you begin to open up the conversation not only with yourself, but the possibility of confiding in your close family and friends about the situation you find yourself in. And that can be done in a way that doesn't seek to denigrate your partner or demonize them, but in a way that allows you to communicate what your experience of the relationship has been and what you might like to change in the future. And that can really open up the conversation with your friends and family about what your experiences have been. That will better enable them to empathize with you, to understand what you're going through, maybe to understand some of what they see when they see you and your partner together. And that can only increase their ability to be supportive in the ways that you need them to be. Being able to describe and give voice to an experience in this way, in normal language, can also give you distance. It can give you perspective because you can begin to ask yourself, what would a good friend of mine say to me in this situation? Or if my friend was in this situation, what would I say to them? What would my friend say to my partner about this situation? And if I was a friend of my partner, what would I say to them? That kind of perspective taking can really help you see things from different angles. And as you broaden your perspective, you can begin to appreciate the nuance, the complexity, the contradictions in this situation. And you can also begin to find the answers to the confusion that you experience and the questions that you have within yourself. And you can begin to be much more trusting of your own perspective and much more attuned to the wisdom and the knowledge that you really do have within yourself. I think another way this is helpful is it allows you not to demonize the other person, but rather to understand the impact that the relationship is having on you and whether you want to stay and try to change aspects of the relationship dynamic, whether you want to invite them to engage with you in changing that together, or whether you want to bring this relationship to some kind of end. That is a decision that can be made based on not on whether the other person is good or bad, not on whether or not they're a narcissist, but on the impact of the relationship on you and what you want for your life and your relationships. Getting self-understanding and really understanding the impact that this relationship has had on you and what you brought to this relationship isn't about blaming or judging yourself, but it is about understanding yourself. And the more you understand yourself and your own reactions, the better chance you have of intentionally nurturing a different kind of relationship with a new person, or indeed in your current relationship, if that is a possibility. This also makes much more space for contradiction, ambivalence, and confusion, all of which are pretty common in relationships with highly narcissistic people and in relationships where there may be emotional abuse. And being able to understand that contradiction and complexity can actually steady you, because rather than having to make the other person the bad guy, you can understand the relationship as it is, and you can handle contradictions. One of the biggest contradictions that you may need to live with in a relationship with someone who's very hurtful or abusive to you is that you can love them. You can see their good side. You can have empathy and even sympathy and compassion for the ways that they've been hurt and the ways that they've suffered. And you can care about them a great deal, and you can recognize that it is not a good relationship for you to be in, and you can choose to leave. I would love to hear your thoughts about handling contradictions and really making sense of relationships and how you have moved forward. So leave a comment. If you like this video, hit the like and subscribe button. I look forward to seeing you next time. And in the meantime, take good care.